Hello and welcome to episode 36 of Late Night Linux, recorded on the 30th of April 2018. I'm Joe, and with me are Phelim.
Evening.
Graham.
Hello.
And Will.
Hello.
Okay, well, we've got a lot to get through. We're going to get to Ubuntu 18.04 later, but first, some news. And let's start with Oracle being complete and utter bastards for a change.
Can you say that?
You can say whatever you like. Come on, cracking down on an iOS developer who included JavaScript in the name of his application to try and game the App Store system, cracking down on him because you own the trademark to JavaScript. That is bastard behavior.
He was probably drinking coffee while he did it too, because he's a monster.
And smoking big cigars, yes. But I didn't actually know about this. I suppose I should have really, but yeah, it turns out that Oracle owned the trademark to JavaScript as well as Java, which they acquired.
It would be nice if this meant we couldn't use JavaScript for anything ever again.
Yeah, that would be the GNOME desktop fuck then, wouldn't it?
What was it? Confine it to room 101 or what was it?
Oh,
Yeah.
does that go or does Node go first?
Oh, yes, please. Don't worry. I'm sure that'll happen soon enough anyway. Some disgruntled 4-line plugin writers.
Can we start calling it node.javascript?
Oh, yes, please.
Well, there's talk of it reverting back to LiveScript, which isn't a great name either, is it?
It's better than Eczema script or ECMA script, as they like to call it.
Or LiveScript.
Terrible name.
But surely it can't change name at this point. It's far too mature.
Yeah, I think the name's established now, and it's there to forever.
The problem is, though, if you can start sending a cease and desist at this point, surely there's the statute of limitations to a trademark. If you don't defend your trademark after a certain period, surely that trademark is not defendable anymore. That's what I don't understand, how they're able to actually go along and do this at this late stage.
We're getting into serious anal territory here, aren't we? I'm not a lawyer. I don't know. That would be my understanding of it, but not being a lawyer, I don't know. But yeah, it's so random for them to attack this one developer. There's so much out there, so many examples of people using JavaScript in names and stuff, and Node.js and all the rest of it. So it just seems weird. Maybe it was just some bored person bored intern or something in the Oracle offices decided to send this letter.
Well, my take on it was that this was a pretty poor quality app, and so perhaps they were just defending their good name and didn't want this guy who, by his own admission, was gaming the way that he was getting search results in the App Store, to just sort of stop him from being a dick and limit the damage that he was doing to their good name.
Oracle's good name, right?
Yeah, maybe. But, right, well, that's enough Oracle bashing. So KDE Connect is one of the best things about the KDE suite of applications and the Plasma desktop and everything. But installing it on a non-Plasma desktop, or a non-Qt desktop at least, pulls in quite a lot of dependencies. And so I hadn't heard of this, but GSConnect, which is presumably GNOME Shell Connect, which is a clone of it, a fork of it.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what you'd class it as, but yeah, it's a re-implementation of the protocol, because obviously it's an open protocol, and it's been re-implemented by a developer. And yeah, essentially you can have your KDE Connect like experience with no dependencies.
You still need to install the KDE Connect app on your phone, is that right?
You do, yes. But that's a Android app anyway, so there will be no Qt like dependencies there anyhow. So
Sure.
I may be wrong on this, but I think the KDE developers actually went to some lengths to remove as many dependencies as they could so that people could do this once the popularity of KDE Connect grew so exponentially, and there were so many GNOME users wanting to use it as well.
that's because they're good guys.
Yeah. And more people using it, the better it will become. It is a great tool. I use it every day.
Oh, it's fantastic. And I love some of the new features that have cropped up in it as well. Like the media tools are fantastic, where you can control your audio player, like whatever it happens to be. Like Amarok, for instance, for me is playing away. And even though that's a really old player, because it integrates into the standard media framework, and given that it hasn't had many updates still, it still works, and I can control that from my phone, no problem. So you've got to be sitting in the other room, no problem, playing away on it. It's fantastic.
Yeah. And the batteries on my mouse have genuinely gone, and I've been unable to do anything on my machine. And then I've been able to use KDE Connect to do something to shut down my machine or do something useful with it, which is really good.
Yeah, that mouse and keyboard feature is brilliant. I think that's the best part of it. It's such a simple idea, but being able to just use your phone as the mouse and keyboard, it's sort of good for what I class as a semi-headless box, where occasionally you want to do some desktop stuff on it, but generally it's kind of sitting there just on the network with no screen on. But then rather than having to hook a keyboard and mouse up to it, it would just be so much easier to be able to use KDE Connect. But I found that if you're running it on any other desktop, it kind of works, but just is a little bit ropey, not 100%. So hopefully now with GSConnect, it's going to be working a little bit better on other GTK desktops. But I'll have to test this on XFCE soon. Have you tried it out on your GNOME desktop, Will?
I have not yet, but watch this space. It's something that I would love to see in 1810. And I was reading about it today, and the ability for it to pause your music when you get a phone call coming in is incredibly useful. You know, I'm on the phone, working from home on the phone a lot of the day, and having that auto pause feature is going to be really useful.
Yeah, it really works.
Yeah, and the biggest problem with a lot of modern phones is the vibrate function of them is so useless that I don't even know mine is ringing away in my pocket until I see it pop up in the icon in the corner of my desktop that says the phone's ringing. I'm like, oh.
Yeah, and the best part is it's in F-Droid as well, isn't it? The Android is part of it.
Yeah.
Excellent. So there's more KDE bollocks in here. KDE Apps 1804 then.
Go on, Graham. You could do it.
What's more new and awesome KDE stuff? Well, these updates are always incremental from the KDE team, so there's never that much in terms of features to talk about. Everything's been revised. There's new stuff in Dolphin and Ocular, and I think from my perspective, the KDE desktop keeps going from strength to strength.
I'm actually inclined to agree with that. I think that when the Plasma 5 desktop came out, it was so much better than 4, and we've just seen this incremental improvement. Just every update that I've tried out has just got better and better and better. And if it wasn't for XFCE and I'm afraid to say Mate, it does come in a pretty close third, which is high praise from me, given that I used to bash KDE on a weekly basis.
Everybody did. The dark days of being a KDE user.
Yeah. But it really has gone from strength to strength, hasn't it?
I think so. The things that I really like about it, the configurability is obviously important, but I like the way it doesn't kind of impose a way to work on you. So on your hardware configuration or how you like. For example, I use a tiling window manager script on KDE, which I really like. It splits my screen up into columns, and I can move windows around, and I still get all the benefits of having KDE behind that. And I just don't know another desktop that can do it.
So, Phelim, what is new in these KDE apps that stands out to you?
Some of the speed improvements in Dolphin have been pretty handy. When you're shifting around a large quantity of small files, there was some people that experienced a fair bit of lag with that. So they've improved that. I think they had a bit of code cleanup in it. And they've done a lot of improvement to try and make the look and feel a bit better, especially for things like terminal window, which surprisingly enough is where I spend most of the time. So the scroll bar is blended in quite nicely there. But one of the cool things they've done is they've integrated there's a service called Hot New Stuff, which is a web service that ties into the KDE Look and Feel website, where you can get themes for various different components like wallpapers, icons, and color schemes, things like that. And you can also now get that tied in there as well. So you can get a lot of people would have different color schemes, like what was the one that was really popular a long time ago? Solarized or whatever it was.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So that was a pain in the arse to try and set that up, because you have to try and get all the different background colors, and then you'd realize that you'd forgot one font, and then you'd end up, you realize that you didn't see one set of text because it happened to be the same color as the other one. So you're making a big mess of things that way, whereas someone who's done all that work, you can now easily go and just grab that online. So that's a great feature, because all those things are already up there, and just making it easier to share that stuff around the place is really nice.
It never really works for me, though, the Hot New Stuff things. Sometimes it'll download stuff. A lot of times it's a link to like kdelook.org. Sometimes it's out of date.
Yeah, some of the searching on it isn't stunning.
I always end up installing stuff manually. A great thing about console, which you just mentioned, is that you can hide the scroll bar, which I really like. I don't know of, so you can just get rid of it completely, and it only appears like when you're scrolling.
I like to see my scroll bars at all times, just to know where I am.
That lovely 70s feel that you go for in your desktops.
Yeah, exactly. No, to be fair, it's 90s style. Let's not go overboard. All right, well, let's talk about Microsoft, shall we? Where do we start with this? The Azure Sphere OS thing. It's got a Linux kernel. It's all about IoT. It's not a Linux distro as such. It's kind of a direct competitor to what Canonical's trying to do with their IoT solution with Snaps and Ubuntu Core and everything, which is a bit strange given that Microsoft and Canonical have worked together quite closely over the last couple of years. I don't expect you to comment too much on that, Will, but what do we think about this? Is this more embrace, extend and extinguish from Microsoft, or is it just them taking a pragmatic decision to use Linux because it's the best tool for the job?
No, I think it's really difficult to guess because, Microsoft keeps its cards very close to its chest. I think the reality probably is a bit of everything. The same reason why they started to get into open source and Linux, quite a long time ago with all their contributions to the kernel. They can see people using Linux on their cloud, and they can undoubtedly see Linux being used in IoT devices, even when they've tried themselves to create very small form factor versions of its OS, like on the Raspberry Pi. So they'll be able to see how popular their versions are versus the Linux versions. And I do think it's probably a pragmatic step. Yeah. Interesting. Richard Stallman's response was initially quite positive about the idea that Microsoft is going to, and have stated that they're going to adhere to the terms of the GPL v2, which of course they would have to. But of course, bringing about all the complexities about Microsoft and its historical kind of role within the open source movement, and of course in its huge stack of patents and goodwill and .NET and all the rest of it. There's a long history here.
Well, yeah, Microsoft makes more, I think, from Android devices than most OEMs who don't make any money at all because of their patents and everything. So they're not exactly friendly, or certainly that part of the company isn't. Phelim, I've seen you being very skeptical and, dare I say it, cynical about this.
Yeah, me and Popey always have constructive arguments about this in the Telegram channel about every now and again. I'm somewhat skeptical, yes. I'm skeptical in the fact that I think people seem to be perhaps over enthusiastically. What's the term? I'm trying to think of the word. I don't know. People aren't bending over backwards for them, but I feel they're maybe giving them a bit too free of a ride with how welcoming they're being. Maybe I'm being harsh. I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't really see them being as overly good or bad. I think they're just being a company, and companies just make money. So I don't think that's good for us. But I don't know whether it could be bad for us though. I mean, more people using your product is great, but you could very easily get swept up in it, and they've got a large marketing team, they've got a large partner team, and that's where the dangerous side of Microsoft is. Because those partners don't care about embracing and hearting Linux as much as, as the core Microsoft guys might heart Linux as much as they want. But the partner side of things is all about being vicious and sharks and making money. And I don't think you're going to win those guys over like that.
But you said then that Linux is our product. And do you really think it is our product? I mean, isn't that the whole point of open source and free software licenses, is that it isn't our product?
I think realistically it is, though. I mean, if you are a company that essentially survives entirely on free software, give or take a few services, you're very different to a company that survives on completely proprietary systems, give or take a few open bits and pieces here and there that you throw out. Like if you compare the budgets of Microsoft and how they make their money, and then the bits that they were to open source, there's no way that there's any comparable difference between the two. Whereas if you were to compare the amount that, say, even Ubuntu would give out as, free software compared to the bits that they'd make, they're not the same thing. You can't equate them. Like,
I think Red Hat's a good example. Red Hat is a product of the advantages offered by open source and Linux. It's not necessarily an altruistic organization. It's there to capitalize on the advantages in developing software in open source and GNU Linux.
Absolutely. But I wouldn't wholeheartedly say Red Hat is innocent completely either. Like, I think they are a company as much as anything else. Now, they do an awful lot of good in the fact that they employ huge amounts of people and they give the vast majority of the important bits of the software out.
Yeah, like System D.
Yeah, it's lovely. It's great. But the fact of the matter is, though, look at the amount of kernel developers they employ and look about all the other stuff. Like, I don't personally like GNOME, but they invest an awful lot of money in it as well. So you can look at all these things and some might say, yes, they are steering large chunks of the Linux ecosystem in directions that they want it to go by funding extra development. But, you do have to pay at the table if you want, that's kind of the way business works. And it is, at the end of the day, a business.
Yeah. And maybe I'm just being devil's advocate in this, but I just think they're both, I don't feel like it's important to not have ownership over the code. The whole point is that it's set free, under the terms of GPL v3 or v2 in terms of the kernel. And you've just got to suck it when people use it in ways that you aren't happy with. And in fact, I do think the end result is that we all get out of it, despite whatever Microsoft has done historically. What this means really is a vindication that GPL v2 and the kernel and the licensing model and the way that it's been developed and distributed is too powerful a force that not even Microsoft can ignore it. And I think that sends a strong message to the entire IT industry.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I would go along with that. The only problem I'd have with it, though, is the fact that it might not be as open as we want it to be, because it doesn't look like any of the tools and any infrastructure around it is going to be that open. I mean, I think it's more of they're using it because it's a kernel that works for all of the developers that develop the low-level chips. And I think really they can't change the mind of those chip developers in China. And I think they had to work with those guys on a chip infrastructure that they would use, and they just kind of worked around it. I think, to be honest, it's almost like the black box that they had to work with themselves.
Well, yeah, and try cramming an NT kernel on a single core ARM device. Good luck. Whereas Linux is lean enough to do that.
Yeah. I feel funny, though, that if you were to look at any mobile phone and you were to hear of the chip that this is based on, would you buy that mobile phone? Because it's a MediaTek chip.
Yeah. And MediaTek is historically not only crap with updates, but also they've been a little bit lax with the GPL compliance, haven't they?
Yeah, it's an interesting choice, but hey, maybe they'll fix MediaTek's GPL violations.
Yeah, maybe. Well, and MediaTek is definitely the cheapest. That's why it's always on the cheap devices, isn't it? But can I return to this thing about Ubuntu and how Canonical are preparing for an IPO? Shuttleworth has been pretty open about that. And a huge part of that, or at least my understanding is that a huge part of it was this IoT solution. And what Canonical are offering vendors is more or less identical to what Microsoft have now come along and offered, which is the back-end server side of it, the software on the actual devices themselves, but most importantly, the update mechanism through snaps in the case of Ubuntu and Canonical. And Microsoft are offering 10 years of support for these IoT devices in terms of security updates. And it just seems to me like they've just read Canonical's offer and just copied it wholesale and even based the thing on Linux. And, what does that mean for Canonical's plans to IPO if Microsoft is going to come and undercut them in this way? And if you are in charge of the budgets for IT departments in a big company, then are you going to go with Microsoft, the name you know, or this relatively young upstart Canonical? It just doesn't look good for Canonical to me.
Well, I don't know. I think that there's enough that the market is big enough and that there are enough established Linux and rather Ubuntu corners of that ecosystem to still build a substantial business out of all of that. So I don't know. I think that the market is big enough for everybody, and those people who would prefer to side with an Ubuntu-based system, Microsoft coming along with something similar is not going to change their minds, and in fact, it might even sway them in the opposite direction. But we'll have to wait and see. I mean, this thing, as far as I know, this thing doesn't exist yet. I haven't seen it offered on any silicon. Is it out already?
Well, at this stage, it's just an announcement, I think, but it's got to be coming pretty soon, and they've got to be inking these deals as we speak, you would have thought. But I think that's a reasonable point that people who care about open source and care about the history are going to be more likely to go with Canonical's offering. But I don't know, Shuttleworth is a very ambitious man. Just look at everything he's done, going to space and all the rest of it. Like, I kind of get the feeling that he would love to break out of this open source bubble or whatever. But then again, Microsoft choosing an open source core for this, the kernel, kind of proves that open source isn't a bubble anymore, is it? It's kind of mainstream IT business. So maybe there is a level playing field to be played upon here.
Right, and if Microsoft, depending on which version of the kernel that they're running, but if people are now making Linux drivers that are compatible with a reasonably up-to-date kernel, then those drivers should work on any other distro as well, within reason. So maybe, actually, it's going to enable more and more Linux vendors to get in onto these chipsets where they previously couldn't have access because the drivers simply didn't exist.
Oh, there's always a silver lining, eh?
It's got to be somewhere. I need a job.
Well, let's end the news with a bit of good news, and that is that the German government have decided to go with a pretty major rollout of Nextcloud. So, good luck, German government. Hope that goes well for you.
So much bitterness.
Well, no, this has got to be good news, doesn't it? That they're rolling out 300,000 users. That's a pretty good test of it, and it means that they're going to potentially spend public money improving Nextcloud, and then we'll all benefit from it. So it is always good to see governments being sensible and going for open source solutions where it makes sense. And clearly this must make sense because they piloted it for 2 years with 5,000 users, and it must have gone well enough for them to now be rolling out this huge deployment. And this is clearly to do with the GDPR stuff that's coming in next month. Because they talk about wanting a completely private cloud and not relying on third-party companies and all the rest of it. And open source to the rescue yet again.
Yeah, as long as the next Munich mayor comes in and says, oh no, I really like Google Docs, and then that's the end of that.
Yeah, well, Google Docs is excellent, I must say, and Drive generally. Better than bloody Dropbox, which I've been forced to use lately, which can just fuck off as far as I'm concerned.
No, it's brilliant. And the best part is you are employing local developers and testing local IT teams and rolling it out everywhere, and everybody gets a share. It's the way it should be, not just big, giant corporations.
Yeah, good to see. So on to a bit of admin then. First of all, thank you to everyone for supporting us on PayPal and Patreon. It's much appreciated. And if you want to join them, you can go to latenightlinux.com/support. And there's various ways to support us there. I've got a new idea for a Patreon perk, which I will not announce yet because I'm still working on it, but may well be in place before the next episode. So isn't that exciting? You can contact us, latenightlinux.com/contact. There's the email address, Telegram group, that sort of thing. And I've got a note in here, OggCamp Call for papers. So OggCamp, which is coming up in August in Sheffield. I really should know the dates by now. It is the 18th and 19th of August. It is a weird mixture of unconference where anyone can turn up and talk and a scheduled track on the main stage. And they want, I say they, I'm kind of somewhat involved, but we want speakers for the main stage. And so there is a call for papers out. So if you go to cfp.oggcamp.org, and we'll link it in the show notes, if you've got an idea for a talk on the main stage, then do submit it, and hopefully they can get a full lineup for that. And yeah, come to OggCamp. I should plug that generally. It's a good event. So of the three of you, who is coming to Sheffield in August?
I'm away, unfortunately. Otherwise, I would definitely have gone.
Yeah, I can't make it.
I think I might even be in work.
All right. So looks like I'll be there alone. Maybe Jason can come if he's got used to being a dad by then. I haven't spoken to him for a while. I think he's been a little bit tired and off the radar, but I think he's doing well, hopefully.
He's probably crying.
Probably. He's probably crying at the lack of sleep. I heard a very interesting podcast about how the lack of sleep is like really bad for you, and being awake is basically low-level brain damage. So, yeah, that's good for you, Phelim, isn't it?
That's impossible.
No one do so out of it all the time. All right, so this episode of Late Night Linux is sponsored by Entroware. Go to entroware.com, and they are a dedicated Linux computer seller based here in the UK, and they sell computers with Ubuntu and Ubuntu Mate 16.04 and 18.04. And you know, I always say they're a company who cares about Linux. Well, in the last few weeks, Mike from Entroware has been helping out with the Ubuntu release. First of all, with a bug that was related to the NVIDIA driver, and he helped out with testing for that. And also he's been helping out with this metrics stuff as well, suggesting a slight change to how they collect the data. So they're a company who engages with the community. They do care about Linux. It's all they do. And they've got a huge range of laptops, from fairly affordable stuff all the way up to huge workhorses that are ideal for basically anything. If you just want something for a bit of light email and browsing, all the way up to 3D art and video editing and machine learning. And almost everything's configurable as well in terms of CPU and RAM and storage. So you're bound to find something to suit your needs and your budget. And they also do some desktops and servers. So they've got all the bases covered there. And they ship to the United Kingdom, Republic of Ireland, France, Germany, Italy, and Spain. And if you do buy one of the machines, then do mention us at checkout. There's a little drop down there. You can put in Late Night Linux, and then they'll know that we sent you to them. So go to entroware.com for all your Linux computing needs. Okay, so Ubuntu 18.04 LTS, something of which no doubt you are very proud, Will.
Damn right.
So this is the first LTS of Ubuntu with the new GNOME desktop. And there's also all the flavors and the server and cloud stuff as well. But as you hear, Will, let's start with the desktop. Looking at it, it's not massively different from 1710, but I suppose that's quite a good thing, isn't it?
Right, that's the whole point, is that we do all the work in 1710 so that we can spend the 1804 cycle closing the bugs and putting the polish on top.
But there have been a couple of changes, and the first one is the best change that Ubuntu have ever made as far as I'm concerned, and that is the minimal install option, which gives you a very lean installation with a web browser and some basic utilities and nothing else. Why has it taken 12 more than 10 years to do this?
So this feature came from a meeting with a customer who explained to us that they were trying to deploy thousands of Ubuntu workstations, and each one of those, when they installed Ubuntu off the CD or the USB stick, that they then had to go through and remove things like games because that just wasn't part of their corporate setup. Yeah, they could have written something to produce a custom version of Ubuntu for themselves, but what they were really interested in was a very straightforward install off the media and it's ready to go. And they came to us and asked, is this a feature that you could help us to implement into 1804? And yeah, of course, we were very happy to do that. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't remember seeing many people on, Launchpad or, I don't know, the forums or whatever, sort of asking for this particular feature. I think it's just something that lots of people thought about, but nobody really ever put into words.
Well, except Ubuntu, who have been offering a separate ISO for, I think, since the last LTS at least, which was pretty much exactly this.
Yeah, and having it as a separate ISO is not really where we wanted to go. We wanted to make this part of a single installer, so you don't have to know that you go and download this particular ISO for this image and you download that ISO for the other image. We wanted it to be part of the single. You go and download a single ISO for Ubuntu desktop, and you've got all this stuff sort of baked in, ready to use.
Yeah, it totally makes sense to me. I don't think you need to have a separate ISO. Just that checkbox in the installer makes total sense to me. The other thing is the metrics collection, which caused a bit of a stink when it was announced. And it's fairly unobtrusive, I think. It's kind of quite well done. I mean, what's the reaction been now it's actually come out?
Surprisingly okay. Well, I say surprisingly, there were a few people that got a bit upset that it was, it's kind of spyware and it got labelled as snooping and that kind of thing, which was never our intention. We did try to explain exactly what it is that we were gathering up front. And in the development of the Ubuntu report tool, which has all been done on GitHub, it's all been in the open. The code's there to investigate, and there was an example of the sort of data we were going to be sending back. So we've been pretty public about what it was that we were gathering. And then when we landed the first run wizard experience, where it takes you through explaining what's in the report and then giving you the option to either send it or not send it, I think that we dealt with that in a tasteful way, and that people saw that it was possible for them to opt out. They saw that the data in there wasn't some kind of snooping, deeply intrusive gathering of all of their machine stats, and most people just sort of went, meh, so fine. It's not so bad.
And it's very easy to opt out as well. You just tick the box and done, which is what I tried testing, and it just worked absolutely fine.
Good. Well, now you can go back and test it and send your stats in.
Yeah, we'll do. I'll be sure to do that. So one thing that I wanted to try was upgrading from 1604 to 1804, and I asked you about this privately, but you can't do that via the GUI yet. You can only do it via the command line, and then you have to go via 1710 to do it. Is that new, that you have to wait till the 0.1 release?
No, it's always been that way. There are usually a few bugs that make the release ultimately, and if you're an LTS user, we don't want people upgrading into something which is not 100% perfect. We do our best to get all those bugs closed, but until you get it in the hands of lots and lots of users, you're not going to hit all of those edge cases. Somebody's installed a particular package which hasn't migrated to the new version properly, or they're on some esoteric hardware where they've got it configured in a very special way. We're not going to hit those use cases until it's in the hands of millions of people. So the smart thing to do there is wait till we hit the 0.1 release. It gives us a good few months to find these edge cases, fix these extra bugs, and then we can flip the switch and be as certain as we possibly can be that people upgrading LTS to LTS are going to have a smooth experience and are not going to hit any of these weird bugs.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, okay, that's enough positive shit, I'm afraid, because here is where I take a giant dump on your entire job. I spent a fair amount of time in the old Unity version in 1604, and I've never been a fan of Unity. There's no point pretending otherwise, but I found that I could actually get stuff done. I was looking for a new hard drive because my hard drive started making clicking noises in my desktop, which is always fun. And then as soon as I bought another one and copied all my stuff to it, it stopped clicking. So now it's in my drawer with a big question mark on it. But in doing a bit of research and stuff for that, I did get to grips with Unity, and I found it all right. Not too bad. Obviously, I prefer XFCE. I would prefer to use Mate or even Plasma 5 before it, but I could potentially use it. Whereas having then tried out the GNOME version, you've done a pretty good job of getting it close, but GNOME is just so fucking horrendous that I just cannot use it. It's just unusable. Everything about it just seems wrong to me. Now, Phelim and Graham, I presume you've had a quick look at this. Are you going to back me up here?
I'm not sure I will, actually. I can't really anyway. But I think Will and the team have done a fantastic job, and GNOME is GNOME.
Well, yeah. No, don't get me wrong. What you have done with your team, Will, you've polished a turd, but a turd it still is, I'm afraid. GNOME is GNOME, but it just makes no sense to me to use it. When there are so many other options out there that are so solid. I just don't understand why GNOME is now the default on all the major distros, essentially.
Well, it's down to you, though, Joe. You have to be the change. You have to go and evangelize those things that you want. You've got to enjoy the choice.
Mm.
So, no surprise, I'm not obviously going to be a fan of GNOME, but yeah, I think if I was going to use a GNOME, I definitely think this is the GNOME I'd use. And I think as a desktop, I wouldn't have a problem recommending this for people to use, but it doesn't work with my head. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, if you'd never used Linux before and you were kind of not entrenched like we all are, if it was someone who's coming, fairly new to computing generally and you just wanted a nice solid operating system for them, then I suppose so. But then you've got all those other great flavors as well. And that's always, you used to talk about breakfast cereals on Linux Voice, Graham.
Well, that's because somebody wrote a really critical post about me, someone O'Reilly, about something that I'd said. There was too much choice in Linux. And this O'Reilly blog post actually pointed out that it wasn't a bad thing that there was too much cereal in the supermarket. That's why we kept bringing it up.
Right, okay. But it is a good analogy. And, there is an Ubuntu flavor for everyone, as far as I can see, from, down to low resource stuff like Ubuntu, all the way through Mate and there's Ubuntu and all the rest of it, up to the GNOME version. And that, to me, is the great strength. And it's telling, I think, that if you look at the download page for 1804, the flavors are given equal prominence, much like cloud and server and everything. You've got desktop, cloud, server, and flavors. And that has always been the strength of Ubuntu to me, that if, like me, you just think GNOME is a complete catastrophe, there's going to be a flavor there that is going to be solid. And from what I've tried out of all the flavors, they all are solid, aren't they? Have you managed to have a look at Kubuntu, either of you KDE guys?
Yeah, and actually really impressed with what they did there because friend of the show, Michael Tunnell, sorry, Michael. He recommended some improvements to look and feel for the guys to help improve the, well, let's face it, not overly appealing looking default theme that KDE comes with. And he gave them a few tips, pointers, and that's what they did. And when you start it up now, it actually looks an awful lot better. It's got ironically enough, the exact same theme that I did, where I used the dark toolbar along the top, but it's white window frame. So you're not looking at a completely dark desktop, but you still have, less brightness everywhere. To be honest, it's actually not unlike the Ubuntu theme itself as well. You're taking a bit of the edge out of things, and I think they've done a great job on that. And they're on 17.3. It's not as high as Neon with some of the apps, but it's right up there, and I think it's a very stable and it's a very good desktop that they've got going on it. So they've done well with that, and it's nice to see that they've still kept up with things.
Is it enough to tempt you away from KDE Neon, though? I'm
afraid it isn't. If it's not bleeding edge KDE, I just can't live with it. Mind you, Neon has got to go to 1804 eventually, so when that all blows up horribly and is in bits, maybe I'll have to come dragging my tail back.
Well, I mentioned Unity being pretty usable and solid, and Ubuntu Mate, what Wimpress has done there is pretty impressive with the Mutiny layout, which is very similar to Unity, and he's even got the HUD and everything. He's done a fairly good job in 1710, and I think he's really nailed it in 1804. And it's, to be honest, what I would recommend to Unity refugees, because we'd heard that Unity 7 was going to carry on, but I haven't really heard any more about that. Will, have you heard any more? I was thinking that we were going to have an official flavor. I think that's one of my official predictions for the year, but it doesn't seem to be materializing.
Not for 1804. There is a team forming around that has formed around that, and they're working hard, but they didn't really form themselves into an official team until well into the 1804 cycle, and so in order to become an official flavor, you have to have that sort of pedigree behind you that says we've been contributing to this project for a long time, we know what we're doing, we know all of the Ubuntu processes, we know all of the Ubuntu teams, and so you can't just go from a relatively new group of people to an official flavor in a few months. So I think we'll see that in the future once they've got their feet under the table and they're a bit more comfortable with the processes. So it will be there. But for the time being, it's still in the archive. You can still install it and it still works more or less exactly as it did.
Hasn't it been moved to Universe, though?
Yes, it's in Universe now. But if this team that are supporting it want to get it back into main, then that's an option. I don't think it's likely to happen, but it's fine. It can live in Universe. It can be there quite happily. It can be maintained. It can be kept up to date. It just means that that it's not going to be installed by default. But if they want to become an official flavor, then that's certainly a route open to them. They just need to have that that sort of pedigree of commitment behind them.
Because things being in universe, I learned with the VLC situation. I don't know if you remember. I think it was about 6 months ago. There was some vulnerabilities with VLC in terms of subtitles, and VLC was in universe, and it just didn't get patched until Quigley came along, Simon Quigley, that is, and patched it. And so that would be my worry, to set someone up with 1804 with the Unity desktop, Unity 7. What if that effort kind of grinds to a halt over the next, 5 years, potentially someone could be using it. That would make me reluctant to do that. And I'd be more inclined to put them on Ubuntu Mate with Mutiny, which, okay, it's not quite exactly the same, but it's kind of close enough. And you know that there's enough momentum behind that project that you're going to get the full 3 years there, which is probably going to be enough. You're going to be into the next LTS by that point, and you should be able to upgrade them on the 0.1 release or whatever. So I don't know. I'd be reluctant to recommend Unity 7 until there's more of a presence there, because you try Googling it and, okay, my food might not be too hot, but I just couldn't find an official website or anything.
Well, the joy of it is that you don't need to, because 1604 is an LTS release and is going to be supported for years to come. So stick on 1604, give this team time to get their stuff sorted out and get organised. By which time, if they're ready to go by 2004, they'll have proven themselves a reliable team and a committed team, and you'll be a bit more comfortable about recommending it to people.
I suppose there's always hardware enablement in the meantime. All right, so in terms of cloud and server and everything, Graham, that's what you write about every day.
Yeah.
Is there anything that stood out to you for this release?
The stuff I work on is doesn't get that much exposure in the kind of Linux community world that I often talk to, which is, with the caveat, of course, that I am employed by Canonical. It's a real shame, because the predominantly those 3 things or 4 things are MAS, which is basically a way of orchestrating bare metal servers. Juju, which is like a command line orchestration tool for deploying huge cloud-based applications to your cloud, whatever that might be. And Conjure Up, which is a way of basically deploying, using Juju and MAS if it needs to create Kubernetes clusters or OpenStack deployments. So Juju and MAS have targeted updates for 1804, but haven't quite made it. I know the MAS team wanted to get release candidate 1 into 1804, and they've not quite managed it. Neither of those have got major updates. MAS has got a UI overhaul in the fact that it uses vanilla now, which is Canonical Ubuntu's really clean kind of CSS framework. You can see it working on ubuntu.com and all of those related sites. And MAS has a web interface that has been moved over to that. Behind the scenes, there's loads of kind of performance improvements where what was taking 100 SQL statements is now just requiring 5 and that kind of stuff. So it's difficult to say it in a pithy way in a podcast what has been improved, but those they really are strong open source tools for working with the cloud, and 2.4, both targeted with Juju and MAS, will make it into this LTS cycle. And I really hope that they get more kind of visibility and more traction. That sounds a bit sales pitchy, but I really do feel it.
Welcome to my world.
Yeah.
But one thing that's changed with the server image, that is now a live image. So you can run it live almost like you can with the desktop. And if you want to debug stuff or whatever, you can just go to a different TTY and just have a server running live, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
But the installer has changed as well. Instead of the old Debian Curses installer, you've got this new kind of halfway house, which I wanted to try out. But the test machine that I wanted to try it out on has got multiple partitions, including Windows and just various. It's my test machine. What can I say? And when it got to the disk selection, it didn't see any of the partitions and offered to just wipe the whole disk. And I was like, no, thanks. And The only other machine that I've got that I can give the whole disk to is 32-bit only, and there's no 32-bit image, so I couldn't try it out, so I didn't get very far with it. And I don't know, it just seems a little bit unwise to put a buggy new installer in an LTS to me. Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe there's a simple way to get the Curses installer, but as someone who just wanted to give it a quick try out, having heard great stuff about it on the Ubuntu podcast, they had an interview there which was really selling it to me. And so I went home and tried it out straight away, and I was just really disappointed with that. I mean, I think that, maybe 1810 would have been the time to put that in rather than the LTS.
I see. That's the beauty of server stuff, though. No server person's going to be able to touch it for ages anyway. I probably won't see it for another 18 months.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably where the 1804.1 update makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, hopefully they'll have fixed that bug. I should file a bug, really, but I'm just too busy. So
Lazy.
Sorry about that. But yeah, overall, this is a pretty solid release for Ubuntu, I think, across the board with the flavors. And as much as I hate GNOME, it is a solid release. It is an improvement over 1710, just bug fixes and stuff. And I think it was the right strategy to go for that then. Oh, we didn't mention going back to Xorg from Wayland. Again, an excellent decision as far as I'm concerned, because Wayland is just not ready yet. I know that Fedora would adamantly disagree with that, but they don't have as many desktop users as Ubuntu. I don't know how much you had to do that decision, Will, but it was certainly a good one as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, we discussed it with the team. We discussed it with Mark as well. He was very interested in how it was going to work out. So we made that call about halfway through the 1804 cycle, so probably about 3 or 4 months ago. It was the most logical and most sensible thing to do.
Presumably 1810 is going to go back to Wayland then.
That's the plan today, but we're in Berlin at the moment to talk about this with stakeholders and other interested parties. So yeah, I think we will. What I'd really like to see is back to Wayland for 1810, get all of the various bug fixes and things that we've been working on landed upstream, the high DPI fixes. We want to make some improvements to multi-monitor, wait for Pipewire to land, get that properly integrated into the desktop so we've got screen sharing and that kind of thing. And then by 2004, be ready for Wayland to hit the big time.
Should we do a good thing, bad thing from Will and a good thing, bad thing from Graham for the release? Since you gave him a brutal kicking, maybe we should allow him win something back here.
Yeah, go on then. So what's the best thing about this release as far as you're concerned, Graham?
Honestly, I think the team's done a brilliant job of assimilating Unity in a really short time, and I think it works really well. And I think most people, if they're not that interested in whether it's Unity or GNOME, won't notice.
And Will, what's the thing you're most proud of then?
Difficult to say. There's so many sort of minor changes under the hood that people won't see. I think for me, I'd probably say it's the live patch integration into the first run wizard. This is a tool, fantastic tool for developers to use, and it's been offered up free of charge. That's not just a sales pitch. It's a genuinely useful tool, and it's there front and center and easy to install.
I have been quite down on live patching generally in the past, so I'd better stay silent on that.
Yeah, no, you need to shut up because you don't have to do any telco work, so you have no skin in this game, so shut up. Live patching for the win.
I know, but Jesus, on your desktop, if you can't afford to restart your desktop, get a fucking SSD. It's only going to take 20 seconds.
Oh, you just wait till you're doing 24 and a half podcasts a day. You'll know. You'll want your live patching too by then.
Yeah, maybe.
And I think big props has to go to the GNOME bug. I think that has to be said as well, because I think that was pretty cool, because that clearly was not getting fixed. And I've seen a fair few blog posts about people who are saying that it didn't seem like that was going anywhere and seemed to have been reported quite a while ago. And it looked like until you guys showed up, it wasn't getting fixed. So yeah, I think that was pretty cool.
Well, to be fair, that was until Joey blogged about it on OMG Ubuntu that it got fixed, and he actually drew some attention to it, because that had been going on for quite a while. They call it a memory leak. It's not quite a memory leak. It's just kind of mismanagement between C and JavaScript, I think.
No, don't say JavaScript. For the love of God, Oracle be on to us.
Oh, no, they're going to pull us down off YouTube and everything. Yeah, fuck you, Oracle. Right, well, on that note then, we better get out of here. So yes, we'll be back in 2 weeks when hopefully there would have been a Fedora release. We'll mention that at least a little bit, so it won't be quite as Ubuntu heavy. So yes, until then, I have been Joe.
I have been Phelan.
I have been Graham.
Auf Wiedersehen. I have been Will.
Auf Wiedersehen, tschüss.
Bye-bye.